1982, wrote a book in English, said, this is my last book I'm going to write in English, explaining why he would no longer write in English. And basically the book was called Decolonizing the Mind. And he only writes in Kikuyu. But what he does is he writes these amazing novels in Kikuyu, and he's written several of them, and then he translates them himself into English, and they get published in English as well. But he always writes them first in Kikuyu, and then he kind of translates them into English so they have wider readership. So several people have taken this quite seriously. Okay, so what did Nyerere's efforts do? What did all this nation building do? This paper uses opinion survey data, and if you look at Tanzanian opinion surveys and look at how strongly Tanzanians identify with being Tanzanian, how proud they are of being Tanzanian, how proud they are of their country, their government, all these kinds of questions, they show much stronger national identity than than residents of almost all other African countries. So there's just this very strong sense of identity in Tanzania that there's unique things about being Tanzanian: language, abolishing chiefs, etc. And this is a great quote. If Tanzania was once an artificial construct of colonial map makers, it is no more. People feel it. They feel Tanzanian, and they didn't 40 years before. That's interesting. So what are we going to do to try to understand what nation building might have done? We're going to get data from these two districts we've already talked about, Busia in Kenya and Meatu in Tanzania. The data that I have for Busia is data that was collected for another project. It wasn't the deworming project, it was a different one, that collected detailed information on school finances, and in particular, local community fundraising for schools. We got this for 84 schools. We also measured ethnic diversity around each school. We had a lot of information on which schools were located where. We got the ethnicity, the tribe, as it's called in East Africa, of the students in all the schools, and we used the ethnic diversity within 5 kilometers of the school as sort of like a village-level diversity measure, saying, look, near this school, what is the ethnic composition? For Tanzania, we do something similar. We got data on the same villages from the witch-killing study, collected data in schools, and we got actually ethnic composition from the village tax register. So in Tanzania, adults have to pay an annual tax. It does not say their tribe in the tax register, but we went through the whole tax register with local government officials and asked people which ethnic group different families belong to. So we got the ethnicity of people in the village. And what we want to do is see if local ethnic diversity, it's a little bit like Easterly's regression. It's going to look just like Easterly's regression. In ethnically diverse communities, do you see more problems in local politics? Do you see more problems raising money for schools? More problems raising money for water wells relative to homogeneous communities? In other words, is there kind of a political breakdown and lack of cooperation between ethnic groups that hurts local public goods provision for things that matter, like schooling and water? And the hypothesis was, do we see that in Kenya, where we know ethnicity is very politicized, where early leaders like Kenyatta grab things for their own group, as we'll talk about more on Tuesday? And do we see less of that relationship in Tanzania, where everything possible was done to try to be equitable across ethnic groups and create a common identity? That's the question. Can you make a dent in an East African setting in these ethnic divisions? So, what does local government look like in Tanzania? This is a picture of a village council meeting that we attended, and you see there's about a dozen or a little bit more participants. They get together, they plan projects, a school is going to be built, they decide how they're going to raise funds for it, and then they go out and organize these water projects or schooling projects. And this is the tale of the two districts. I told you some of this. Luyas are the largest group in Busia. They're about 70% of the population. Now, there are communities that are more or less diverse. The average degree of ELF in these Kenyan village communities is about 0.23, so pretty homogeneous. But there's variation, as I'll show you, between about 0 and 0.5. So there's some communities that are even at 0.6, but lots of communities at 0.2, 0.3 ELF. In Meatu, the largest group is 85 to 90%. There are some smaller groups. What's kind of interesting in both these cases is the majority group belongs to a language family called the Niger-Congo language family, and the subgroup of that language family called the Bantu language family. So actually Kisukuma, the language of the Sukuma, and Kiluya, the language of the Luya, are actually fairly closely related. They're both basically Bantu majority areas. The minority groups in both of these areas are mainly what are called Nilotic speakers. That's a different language family. So there are different language families within sub-Saharan Africa that are very different. So the Bantu languages and the Nilotic languages are as different as Chinese and Turkish, or Turkish to English. They're very, very different. But within those families, Kisukuma and Kiluya, within those languages, there's a lot of common words. So I had several staff from Busia help me with the data collection in Meatu when I got started, because I've been working with folks in Kenya, and they could understand maybe 60% of Kisukuma or something. There was some intelligibility of words. Okay. I mentioned similar crops. There was this focus on local school infrastructure and wells. Busia is a bit richer than Meatu, and Busia has a bit better rainfall than Meatu. So they're not exactly the same. There's some differences. What do we find? Well, we're going to run a regression that looks just like the Easterly regression. We're going to regress an outcome, like the amount of money raised for schools, say, that outcome Y, on the degree of ethnic diversity, the ELF measure, in the village. And we're going to control for some other things. Sometimes we'll control for some socioeconomic variables, X. We're going to do that separately for Kenya and Tanzania, and basically compare that term tau. And we'll test, is tau the same in Kenya and Tanzania? In other words, does more diversity, and we were thinking that more diversity might have a worse effect in Kenya, does greater ELF, greater diversity in a Kenyan village, lead to worse outcomes than it does in a Tanzanian village? That was the question we were interested in asking. And if we do find that that's the case, it provides some suggestive evidence that all this nation building stuff, trying to bring people together across groups, may actually help them cooperate and have better public outcomes. So what do we find? Let me show you a couple of plots. The x-axis here is local ELF in the village. This is for the Kenyan villages. And the y-axis is the total amount of primary school funds. Each dot is a community or village in per capita terms. ELF of 0 means it's homogeneous ethnically. ELF of 0.5, 0.6, these are very diverse areas. Already you can see a negative slope here. So more diverse areas have somewhat less funding for schools. And in fact, the axis is pretty spread out. In proportional terms, some of those effects are pretty big. Here's another one. This is desks per pupil. We got a bunch of different measures. Funding, desks. Desks are very important. In places without desks, kids can't as easily write and practice math and writing. They're sitting on the floor holding books, etc. So desks are pretty important. And just to get a sense of the magnitude here, going from an ELF of about 0.1, very homogeneous, to about 0.5, quite diverse, is associated with a reduction of about a third in the average number of desks in these communities. So that's a pretty big effect. What does this relationship look like in Tanzania? I tried to use as close as possible measures, school funds and desks. In Tanzania, and in fact, the axis here is a little weird because we have that one outlier up there, which I think is in the district capital. There's not a negative relationship here. It's pretty flat, and it's not a statistically significant relationship. If we look at desks, if anything, the relationship is positive here, slightly positive. This is a little confusing. What could be going on here? Does this make us worry a little bit about omitted variables? Or what goes through your mind if you think diversity, say in Kenya and other settings, has a negative effect, but here we're seeing a positive effect? Is it the Silicon Valley effect? You bring different types of people together and it just sort of leads to better outcomes? Is there an omitted variable bias you could think of? Like, what would be the omitted variable bias you'd be concerned about here? Maybe there's more sort of investment. Now, this is meant to be local fundraising, but this is supposed to be the community raising funds for a lot of this stuff. What might be an omitted variable? Why might you see a positive relationship between diversity and these kinds of outcomes, even if diversity itself has a negative effect? What could be one of these omitted variables X floating around? Yeah. If one has more what? Okay, so that's a really interesting point. So to the extent, imagine there's a majority group that's poor and a minority group that's well off. Maybe as you become more diverse, you're getting more and more of this wealthy minority group, and therefore you're really just getting the effect of that group rather than a diversity effect of some kind. So that's a major concern in all these studies on ethnic diversity. And the way you deal with it, and this is the way we did it, is we control for the shares in that X term. We control for the shares of all the major groups. So some of them come in significant. There are groups that seem to do better than others, but that's not what's driving this relationship. But that's a central issue in the literature. Yeah.
It also seems like in Lucia, there's a lot more villages with higher ethnic
Yep.
diversity than in Moatu.
Yep.
So I feel like this villages might have more variation and extent than Lucia.
Yeah, so in Busia, there was more massive villages out here. I mean, I think my concern in looking at this, and this is a concern with all the literature correlating diversity with outcomes, is some places become diverse for different reasons. Some places are diverse because maybe they're effectively the border between two ethnic regions, and those border areas become very diverse. Other places are diverse because maybe they're towns or markets that attract people from all over. So I think the main concern in interpreting this is to the extent that some of these are the larger villages, the larger markets, the larger towns, these are where maybe better educated, more ambitious people sort of move to have more opportunity. So, San Francisco is diverse because people, the Bay Area is diverse because people move here because there's interesting jobs, interesting things going on, so it attracts people from around the world. And that kind of diversity may just be very different than kind of long-standing ethnic boundary diversity. And I think that may be part of what's going on here. Yeah. Completely. To the extent that really this pattern is driven by omitted variables, then it's much harder to interpret this relationship because we don't know how much of it's the endogeneity and how much of it's a diversity effect. Now again, what did we do here in this study, which I'm going to list limitations, there's a bunch. We tried to control for ethnic shares, control for education, so if you think it's correlated with the education of the population, we control for that. We controlled for whatever we had that we thought might relate to these outcomes, but maybe we're missing something, and this is being driven by omitted variables. We can't rule that out. This is, when you're in a world without experiments and without good regression discontinuity designs, it's very hard to rule out all those omitted variables. Okay. In addition to this evidence, so the statistical evidence shows the slopes are different. We can debate exactly how to interpret it, but in Kenya, diversity is associated with worse outcomes, and in Tanzania, it's kind of zero, if anything, slightly positive. We went around to try to understand what was going on, and we did interviews in both Kenya and Tanzania. And when we did these, in Kenya, we found interesting things. We went to the most diverse community in the sample. It was a school called Matumbai that had 3 large ethnic groups, none of which was a majority in the school. And there was constantly debate and fighting about which of these groups would have the head of the parent-teacher association, which of these groups would sort of feel control for the local school committee. And there was also a feeling that came through in our interviews that there was a lack of trust between communities, that if someone from the other group came to power, maybe I'll give them money for the school and they'll steal it. We kept hearing that over and over again. So this was actually also one of the worst funded schools in the whole sample. When we were doing these surveys in 2000, they didn't even have any school buildings. They had never been able to organize to build school buildings. All the classes took place under trees. So when it rained, there was no school. It was really a disaster. Now, 3 or 4 years later, school buildings were actually built in this community. What we found in some other work, some work of mine with Mary Kay Guggenheim at University of Washington, is we got the school records from all these schools. And the headmasters basically keep track of their fundraising and all their different activities. And one of the things they do in these schools is they have elaborate activities to raise funds. This is really all voluntary public goods provision. Basically, school committees go to parents and say, give us money, or go to the community, give us money, we need to do stuff for the school. They're not getting anything from the central government for that, or very little from the central government. So it's voluntary donation. And there are different strategies for getting people to donate. We found lots of details in the records of how the headmasters were doing this. So for instance, sometimes at community meetings, they'll announce the names of all the parents who have not yet contributed to the school committee. That's kind of embarrassing. In other cases, they send letters home with the kids, and they say, okay, give this to your mommy and daddy. And the letter says, give money to the school. We need money for the school. In extreme cases, when parents aren't giving anything, they send a local chief or assistant chief to the home of the parent to encourage them to give. Now, they have no legal power to make them give, but it's pressure, social pressure of various kinds. In our data, we tried to correlate these, what we call social sanctions, with ethnic diversity. In the ethnically homogeneous areas, there are tons of social sanctions. In the ethnically diverse areas, there are almost no social sanctions. In diverse areas, people are very hesitant to try to pressure members of the other group. Basically, people felt very empowered to kind of motivate, mobilize, cajole, embarrass by reading names of members of their own group. But in Matumbai, which was a third, getting up there as a Luya head of the school committee and listing out all the Teso parents who hadn't paid didn't happen. There was a reluctance to kind of start that discussion. That was interesting. It feels like it's easier to mobilize homogeneous communities. It's easier to get everybody on the same page. It's easier to pressure each other. Maybe anybody who's been part of a small, tight-knit ethnic or religious community or even just town can understand that dynamic, where within your small community, you can be pressured a lot by the relevant people. What happened in Meatu? We did the same kind of interviews. We went around Meatu around the same time, and we asked people questions. And we said, the same questions we asked in Kenya. In Kenya, we went to Matumbai and said, what happens here? How do you raise money? What's the issue of ethnicity? And we said, oh, ethnicity, that tribe, I don't trust them. This is happening. I can't raise money. It was on everybody's mind. We went to Tanzania, and we said, so how does ethnicity affect your school committee in some of those diverse areas? And they would say, huh? What do you mean? Oh, like different groups, different ethnic groups, different tribes. What do you mean? Explain what you're talking about. So we would go back and forth for like 5 minutes and say, oh, now we understand what you're talking about. Oh, yeah. Oh, no, this is Tanzania. We don't have those problems here. And they would just sort of laugh. Like, yeah, in the rest of Africa, they have all this tribe stuff, but it's not what we do. We're just all Tanzanians. These are just actual quotes. We simply live as Tanzanians. In other words, we see each other as all belonging to the same group. There isn't this in-group, out-group thing. So after 40 years, when you even try to understand what the ethnic divisions look like in this region, you get nowhere. You're like, oh, no, that's like, we don't think about that. That isn't relevant to us anymore. We're just Tanzanians. Okay. So what are the limitations? You guys have pointed out some. It's a pretty interesting finding. It's pretty suggestive. It suggests that maybe these macro-level national policies can help public goods provision on the ground and maybe economic outcomes on the ground. But there's a lot of limitations to this study. And in terms of the kind of econometric rigor, it's very different than some of the experiments we've been looking at. So what are some of the obvious caveats? There are 2 countries, Kenya and Tanzania. In the story I've been telling you, I've been attributing the differences in public goods provision to all the nation-building policies. That's sort of plausible. Some historians agree. The countries did look very similar at baseline. But maybe there's just something else going on. It's just a sample of 2. Ideally, we would have loved to have 100 countries, and we would have loved to have randomly allocated nation-building. It doesn't work that way, though. So 2 countries. The second thing, we can't really distinguish between the impact of Swahili on the one hand versus getting rid of the tribal chiefs versus all the other reforms. There was a lot of stuff going on that may have all come together in a sort of package, but if you're Sierra Leone and you're embarking on this road of attitudinal change and creating a strong identity, what should you do? What should you emphasize? Language? Tribe? Tribal chiefs? Getting rid of tribal chiefs? What's the key? We don't have that answer in Tanzania because we have all these things at once. We also don't have panel data on ethnic cooperation, so we can't use a difference in differences. I would have loved to have known if in 1960, in these exact two areas, funding levels for schools and wells looked exactly the same. If that were true, and today they look really different, that would be pretty interesting. At least we'd had that change over time. But we don't know. Maybe they would have looked different even without nation building. We can't really rule out that story. And I think the ultimate concern is the indigeneity point that was raised. Maybe there was just some reason why Tanzanians were able to implement these policies and Kenyans weren't. I was sort of saying, hey, Nyerere in Tanzania and Kenyatta in Kenya and all their differences, that's kind of like a natural experiment that pushed their countries in different directions. But maybe they were more of a reflection of underlying attitudes than I claimed. Yeah. Yeah, we won't, but we can. And what happened there is in the 70s, Tanzania did terribly. During the socialist period, when they were nationalizing industry, collectivizing, forcing people into villages, Kenya was growing a lot faster than Tanzania. Since then, actually, I cut this bullet point like half an hour before lecture, but the bullet point is, since the mid-80s to 1990, Tanzania has actually had faster growth than Kenya. Now again, what does that do to it? It could be due to a lot of different things. But at least at a minimum, it's sort of broadly consistent with all these policies Nyerere pursued didn't hurt Tanzania. They've been growing really quickly over the last, say, 25 years or so, faster than Kenya. Okay, so just last slide in the last couple minutes. This case sheds light on maybe the origin of institutions, the origin of identity, or social capital, the connections we feel. You need charismatic leaders to do them. You could see, and this is sort of the question here, if nation building was part of the reason why Tanzania has been so peaceful, they have much less political violence than their neighbors, they haven't had a civil war, they've had a lot of political stability, growth, etc. If nation building and feeling commonality as Tanzanians was part of that, you could see this as an investment in the future. And if so, maybe other African countries should adopt these, this approach. And maybe Sierra Leone is a country that could consider it just because post-war periods could be windows of opportunity for transformation. After a war, when there's been so much displacement, maybe that's the time to kind of press the reset button and rethink what it means to be Sierra Leonean. And this is the last slide, and it's a clicker question just to wrap up. Given what you've heard about Tanzania, if you kind of think the Tanzanian nation-building approach has had some promise, do you think these kinds of policies might actually lead to a stronger national identity and better outcomes in Sierra Leone too? Is there any hope for these ABC policies, or is it just a kind of a waste of time? So just 5 more seconds, and then we'll wrap up. Okay, so what do people think? Some people are optimistic. It's too early to say. Pessimistic? That seems reasonable. Okay, see you guys on Tuesday.